Hello, everyone. I am Elio Faucheron,
I'm Niniri Niri.
and welcome to our newest episode of Endtalkers. Turns out this is the first one we've recorded in a couple of weeks, and post 6.1.
Yeah, we've been busy, and uh, hopefully you've all been enjoying the content that Elio's been putting out on the YouTube in the meantime.
Yes, and I am pretty sure that the prior two episodes, due to life circumstances, will be coming out later rather than sooner. So there's a good chance that they've come out post 6.1, and we have said something in them that is either erroneous or maybe slightly silly in the wake of latent revelations.
That's almost certainly true. Yes. Hopefully you can forgive us on that one.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's been some really awesome stuff, social stuff going on in the Discord lately that the community's been involving itself in.
Yeah, we have a lore book club going on for recovering over Encyclopedia Eorzea Volume 1 and 2. We've got the streams that are going on. We've got the...
Yeah, and a heck of a lot of discussion going on in the channels here as well. So come and join us if you want.
Well, with that said, shall we begin our journey upon the moon?
I think we shall.
Okay, so we venture on to where we left off last time and enter Mare Lamentorum. Upon
Yes.
entering it, the very first thing that happens before anything else is we get an Emmett Self quote. So, long before Dalamud
was forged to imprison an elder primal. The eldest of them all, savior of the star, was sealed within a moon of his own. Souls sacrificed to grant him life still slumber and dream of the day he and we will be made whole. Here he waits, in this cold, barren place, his cradle and his grave. Silent lamentations and prayers of hope echo soundlessly to a
sundered star adrift and alone. So, not foreboding at all.
Not foreboding at all. And there's a little bit of it calls it almost has a self-awareness, let's say, about the repeated moon prison theming of 14. You know, you see Bahamut, another elder primal, imprisoned within Dalamud, and of course you see the big boy imprisoned in his own moon in this patch.
That is the official term for Zodiark, I believe, is Big Boy.
Yeah, he's a big boy, isn't he?
Yeah, no, very much so. And you also get the idea of silent lamentations and prayers, which becomes relevant not only to the shades that linger, but, literally Mare Lamentorum, the sea of lament. It's the somber attitude of Emmett Silk in his delivery and in his words matches what this place is, both in name and purpose.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And of course, the name is a reference to the fact that in modern science we refer to areas of the moon typically as seas. You have various regions of the moon are referred to as the Sea of X and the Sea of and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a very lovely, or at least I guess for my ear, it's always been a very lovely piece of nomenclature. It's there's something about the word mare that's and then the idea of the sea of
tranquility.
Yes, the Sea of Tranquility. Thank you very much. Yes, I love the Sea of Tranquility. And you also have, though, within Mare Lamentorum and the moon, you have the Sinus or Sinus Lacrium, so the Bay of Tears, and the Sinus Torment. So the Bay of the Bay of Torment, or Tormenti, I believe it's what it is called.
Yeah, you've got a lot. You've got the Sea of Fertility, you've got the Sea of Nectar, the Sea of Cold. There's a bunch of them.
But we arrive via the Nethergate, which is not only the manifestation of the portal from the Tower of Babel, but is really interesting because we know that it lingers, because it becomes the tool by which later on the Scions will not only arrive but leave and re-enter.
Yes, yeah, and it's the tool by which the Sharlayans intended to evacuate people as well.
It's interesting that it's made manifest and can be maintained, and I wonder if the fact that the Tower of Babel does not need as much energy in order to power the gateway to the moon itself is kind of interesting. And you have to wonder, does it operate like an aetherite, where you're essentially being condensed into aether and being shot to a directional point, or is it some other fundamental fundamental mechanic of aetherology.
I kind of envisaged it working similarly in end result at least to an aetherite.
Well, when we arrive, what was your sort of first thought of the map? And also, what did you think of the music? Because my favorite map music, save for the final map's music, is probably this theme. I just think it's somber, melancholic vibe, and the way in which it almost sounds like the shades of those who are left behind are chanting. It's just so fitting.
Yeah, this is a very mournful area. Obviously, that declines a little bit when you get up to the Loporrit, but yes, it is certainly a very emotive sort of atmosphere that they've built in Mare Lamentorum. I very much enjoy it. When I was sort of getting there, of course, my initial emotion was excitement.
Yeah. To the moon at last.
Right, excitement, wonderment, and there was also, like you said, this general melancholy that sort of didn't make me sad or anything necessarily, at least not in that moment, but I could feel it. It was palpable.
You really had a sense of what was lost, and more almost extreme version, I feel, of like what happens when you witness Amarat, right? Like the more time you spend in Amarat, you see more and more of the tragedy and this feeling of what was lost. But there's something almost more raw about it on Mare Lamentorum.
Yeah, it's. I think that people have always, for as long as since we've gotten up there, people have always looked to the moon with this sort of somberness. It's so empty and still, and almost, it's black and it's white and it's grey. It's very almost mournful, I feel.
Well, and it's almost interesting too, because you think about that, and you also think about how Minfina has often been associated with kind of like being a mournful goddess. Like she's not quite like she's not Nymea, right? Like she's not the goddess of tears per se, but she is often associated with unrequited love or failing love or all these sort of sad ideas, and while also having her symbol be the moon. Or you think of Yotsuyu, right, and her story. It's like all the imagery with the moon seems to deal with tragedy.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely true. If you look in real life as well at the often myths around the moon and the sun, portray them as tragic, sort of star-crossed lovers doomed to never truly meet again.
Heck, even in Eden, even in this very game. Well, that's not sun and moon. So sorry, that's more Gaia. I'm thinking of Gaia and Artemis. The idea of Earth and Moon, unable to, but similar, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, I know that we both love Lord of the Rings very much, and that is that is also true in Lord of the Rings, of course. The sun and the moon are doomed not to meet, and when they do meet, they burn each other. It's a classic touchstone of culture, and I think Final Fantasy XIV executes that very well.
Very much so. Yeah, and I guess maybe I'm just a sucker for melancholy too, though, because I'll sometimes sit in Mare Lamentorum and experience it. And for a map that's relatively barren, all considering, like if you subtract the Loporrit section, especially, I mean, even with it, the map itself is very expansive but kind of barren. I never felt let down by it. At the same time, though, even while playing through it, and even now, I genuinely still enjoy it.
Well, I think that if it had been teeming and busy and felt hugely populated in any way, I think that would have been a letdown.
Yeah.
As opposed to the contrary.
Maybe this is not my favorite part of it, but I cannot express how excited I was and also how useful this is, but being able to see Atheris proper.
Yes.
And in its full rotation, and to see the physical shape of Mericidia and the New World in their full glory. Oh my god.
Yeah, I can confirm that Elio was sending screenshots of the of Atheris in our chats for about 2 or 3 weeks afterwards.
I love geography, man. And because like the best we had was that 3.x shot of Elidibus on the moon, and that was kind of like a placeholder Mericidia. We weren't sure how like its size and shape would match up in the end, because it's more of like a static shot of the planet. So now being able to see them in their fullness But of course, they still have they have the axis of it tilted away from the moon in such a way that you can't really see most of Ilsabard. So you can't like see where Corvos or the Ilsabardian mountain range is, or all these like specific details I want. I'm like,
Yeah, they definitely chose not to give us the full details.
But we also get to see just how much of Atheris' ocean, and Jesus Christ, is the glass ocean enormous.
Yeah, which is, of course, true of real life as well. It really makes me excited to go to, the New World, to go to Mercedes, to go to these distant places that are just so far flung. I mean, it feels weird to say, oh, they're far away when we stood on the moon.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a bright future of exploration. It's just a question of what's coming first.
Yes.
So we venture onto the Watcher's Palace. We witness the shades. We witness or maybe a few shades, remnants of some freed aspects of the echoes of those sacrificed for Zodiarch. And we don't necessarily have a context for it. But we venture on into the Watcher's Palace and then find the Watcher himself trying to, I guess we shouldn't necessarily gender them, but like themselves trying to repair the brands and admitting that they maybe haven't talked to people in a while.
Well, it makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah, I was really excited to see the shades of the unsundered world, and then to go into the Watcher's Palace. Do you think that the resemblance to Allegan tech is intentional?
I'm torn on that. The very sightseeing log kind of emphasizes how much it's supposed to be similar in nature to Emerald and how it's harkening back onto that. And so it's also hard to tell because when we look to Elvis, we look to Emerald, we look to these limited examples of the architecture of the Unsundered world, and I'm never quite sure when to think that something is the basis for what was inspired on the Sundered world coming from the Unsundered world, or just at a certain point you can only have a certain level of architectural differentiation before you kind of run out of hard delineation lines.
True. And it's also possible, of course, that looking at the if we got to look at the design book that they've got for the Unsundered world somewhere, for Amarat somewhere, maybe it looks more like the stuff that they've got in there that we've yet to see. Who knows?
You heard it here. Yeah, Oda, give us access, please. Koji, someone get in touch.
No, that would be nice.
But yeah, it is interesting that it does harken on to it also with the closeness of the moons. The fact that the Heimdall probe exists, has been crashed onto the moon proper after Dalamud activated during the Seventh Umbral Calamity.
Yeah.
There are close associations with Allag. I mean, heck, I remember before 6.0 came out, I theorized that the Loporrits might actually have been Allag's fault because we saw the crash Heimdall probe and it made sense. Oh, what if Allag had put chimera bunnies on a probe and shot it up into the moon? Kind of that whole idea of sending animals into space for test flights, harkening onto our real world history.
Yeah, I mean, I would not be surprised one bit to learn that the Allegans, who had space travel to a degree, would have seen this structure on the moon. It's not certain, but it's possible.
Yeah, it would have been really surprising that the fact that they had the Heimdall probes to bear witness to Dalamud itself, you'd think they would have scanned at the moon at least once or twice.
Yeah, and the Ragnaroks seem to be base-worthy.
At the very least, we make them so.
Yeah, exactly right, yeah. That's how we achieve that, of course.
Yeah, but I guess that comes later.
Yeah.
So we don't get to see it quite as much at first, but what did you also think of the Zodiarch's image that you see sitting in the center there?
I actually preferred how his model looked because I saw the image and I was like, okay, well, it's very Amano.
Yes.
I mean, I'm sure it was drawn by Amano, but I was like, oh, this is a classic Amano design. And I was wondering if I wanted something a little different, maybe. But I found that I got that when I saw the actual model for it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we'll touch on that when we get to the trial itself. But yeah, I saw that, and you think of chaos, right? You think of
yes.
I mean, it's so very Amano, and so that classical it's not even just demon. There's something more, like this demon oni organic. It's demonic but not Christian. I don't like I'm trying to think of like a way to frame it because it's so specific to his style.
I mean, he's hugely distinct in his style, like you said, and Chaos himself. Like you said, the design that you see in that picture is very reminiscent of Chaos, of FF1 Chaos, not FF Origin. But when I was looking at it, personally, I think that, obviously there is this Western influence on Chaos's design and on the the design that we see in game in this art. But I also think that it draws hugely from D&D, actually. I think Amano took a lot of inspiration from Dungeons & Dragons.
I mean, that makes sense. A lot of his contemporaries did as well, both in art, but also in game, in games and game designs all around him.
Right, exactly. I mean, a lot of the early. I mean, look at the just look at the Quirl, for example, which is based on the. I was thinking of Displacer Beasts.
Yeah, and also like the Mind Flayers, which there are versions of all throughout Final Fantasy. Yeah, there's just. Even the representation of goblins in it are very close to that, like classical, advanced D&D era versions of a lot of that stuff.
Yes, so they're sort of partly based on that, and they're named for. I think there's another book written by some guy. I write about it in some of the articles, some of the dungeon articles, and he basically took the Displacer Beast, renamed them Quirls, and put them in his book, and that's where the name in Final Fantasy comes from. So yeah, I mean, D&D is a huge influence on early Final Fantasy.
And we also know from Yoshi P's own words that it was really important to him that both Hydaelyn and Zodiark really matched the artwork that they were given from Amano as close as possible. And it took time to like really finesse and fine tune that. And I think they nailed it. I think if you look at the artwork that they released, well, half of it Hydaelyn, half of it Zodiark, in balance with each other, those trials, I think, really do feel like you're going up against what is that piece of art made manifest within a game. Like, there's always limitations, right? You can't, the flow of Amano's ink and lines can't in some ways be physically manifested in a character model, but as close as you possibly can get, I think they did.
Yeah, you'd need to go almost like a No More Heroes style art style to get even close. But the I agree. I would almost phrase it as the models that we see look like a real version of as if that art was on the like the walls of a cathedral of a faith that worship these beings. Like, this is how the worshippers of these beings would almost perceive it, which maybe is what they were going for, considering the nature of the beings that we're discussing.
Well, and it's super cool too when you think about them in contrast to their totemic representations, because you have the light and dark totemic representations as basically identical, even though the individuals themselves aren't like physiologically identical. And you even have Reen in the version of Eden, where her iconography is actually more both in line with the ultimate style of Hydaelyn as well as the totemic representation. And so it's like this midline between the two, which is also interesting.
Which I think makes sense for us, because we are almost glimpsing an element of the true Hydaelyn and our own perception of Hydaelyn melding in Reen.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. It is that. So we also are dealing with the brands which have been broken. We were kind of talking about this as we exited the last episode, but the brands all are representations of the elemental aspects of Aether, which is super cool.
Yeah, so you've got your searing fire, your striking lightning, which of course sort of lightning strikes. You've got your biting wind, drowning water, numbing ice, and crushing earth, all across these brands. It was something that I mentioned. I messaged in the chat the moment I got to Mare Lamentor, and while I was playing through the expansion, actually.
Yeah, and it's super, super cool. One of the things I noticed too while working on this was if you look at them from a north to south perspective, they match the elemental chart placement of like the Shadowbringers chart that you're used to thinking of. If you think about the ones that are associated with Astral at the top three and Umbral on the bottom three, they are directly in order in the same way.
Yeah, and who's to say there's not something to be surmised from that? Obviously, the people of Eorzean have not commonly been able to see this site, but I would be surprised if it did not have some unconscious influence on the wider culture. Of course, not to mention nothing of the fact that many people worship Hydaelyn, who created this.
And it's really interesting when you think about the moon as well, because the moon's outer shell, the moon, the physical structure of the moon, is a representation of Hydaelyn's ability and creation of stasis. It is light, and yet its core is darkness. It is both. It is the umbral and the astral in one.
Yeah, I mean, of course, well, we see, at length that balance is critical in this universe. We can't just have, light or we end up with the first. We can't just have darkness or we end up with the 13th.
We can't just have joy. We have to also have despair. I mean, like, that's also part of, Hydaelyn's lesson, right? In order to have hope, in order to appreciate and enjoy life, you cannot just have joy. You must have sorrow and joy.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you completely.
So one of the cool things I like about the Watcher is they kind of are like, I am not here to judge whatever you do. I am just here to observe. They have the line, what is right and good? Ask 1,000 souls and receive 1,000 answers. I offer none. I am Watcher and Jailer, not the judge.
Yes, which I think is something that we start to see from many corners. We see it in the decision to go with the Loperites or to try to head to Ultima Thule later on. We see that either one is a justifiable decision. We see that we almost see that in Hydaelyn slash Finat themselves in their decision. She does not even necessarily defend her decision all that much to us at the time. She understands that it was very difficult, of course.
I mean, she forced suffering literally perpetual suffering upon existence, or at least our entire star's existence. And for all you can say that was probably the right choice, it's still horror. It is in a definitional sense, right? Not in a, I don't mean that in a judgmental sense, but she did inflict horror upon the world.
Yeah, I mean, we shall walk, yes, but it's been a long and hard road. Doesn't mean that it was wrong to do so, but double-sided sword.
Yeah, there was a cost. In order for it to be what it was, there had to be a cost.
Yes.
And that also kind of, though, ties into when we talk to the shades, that we go down to investigate the remaining brands, and the shades kind of are gathering around them, and the echoes are gathering around them. And what's interesting is a lot of them have lines that either echo or are direct references to lines from the people from the Answers Reprisal, the people who are calling to Zodiark, who are calling for salvation, for the reclamation of a paradise lost. What's fascinating is that what comes into focus is that what we are seeing are not the pale shades of memory like something in Amarant. It is the souls of those people, and that becomes all the more clear when we see Hythlodaeus later. And that the fact that these guys seem lost and broken and desperate and just want salvation was not a reflection of something that happened over the intervening 10 millennia, really. This is where they were at when they sacrificed themselves to Zodiark. This is where they were.
Yeah. Of course, they didn't see the world with, the fragments of peace returning that briefly existed before Hydaelyn shattered Zodiark. The very nature of their world was turning against them. Obviously, the destruction that we see in the final days is bad. It's horrible. Our emotions are twisting us into monsters. Our family, our friends. But in a very similar sort of vein, although the physical bodies of the ancients weren't being twisted, I would imagine that they considered their creation magic very similar to that. Almost an inherent part of them, and the fact that their powers were being turned against them. It's a premise for a horror game, really.
It really is. I mean, I totally agree. I think, in my mind, I see the perversion of their creation magics upon them as really not that dissimilar in any way to what we suffer. I do think that even though, yes, their physical forms were not twisted as ours were, it effectively, I feel like spiritually, emotionally, I think it's very much the exact same.
Yes, I completely agree with you. From like you said, from an emotional standpoint, from a spiritual standpoint, I think that we experience a very similar type of thing, and it's a horrendous, horrific thing. So there's no wonder that these people are begging or crying, praying out to Zodiac to save them, and even now, of course, because they're not, these aren't people. These shades, really, they're almost sort of fragmented reflections of the souls that were fed into Zodiac.
What's very interesting is some seem more fragmented than others, and the fact that Hydaelyn seems so lucid even onto before Zodiac's being freed. You could choose to read that a couple of ways. I think you can choose to read those as the shades are many or most of the shades are basically lucid. Maybe only some are. I tend to read it much more as just some are, but it is interesting just how lucid Hydaelyn is.
It's because he's the best boy.
That is, you're not wrong. You're actually, I would rephrase that. You are correct. I have more than one note in here that I think is Hydaelyn best boy, Hydaelyn is bae, go Hydaelyn. Okay, cool. Yeah, got them all down. Hydaelyn is awesome. But I guess I would point out that the Hydaelyn that the Echo that we meet, as lucid as he is still not fully formed up until Zodiac's fully freed. So
yes,
even then, it's to some amount they are limited in scope of their freedom or awareness outside of Zodiac.
They're almost like vapors evaporating off the wider body of Zodiac and sort of gathering around like a cloud around his prison.
There's just some really beautiful lines though from some of the shades, like there's that I think capture their emotions, right? Which is such tragedy yet no catharsis, such truth yet no consolation.
Yeah,
I mean that just says it all, really. And you think about, as ironic as it might be, in a lot of ways they're more childlike than we are. They did not know suffering as a sundered person did. And to go from that directly into experiencing the final days, I mean, can you imagine?
Well, exactly. I mean, look at Hermes. A lot of people look at Hermes very uncharitably, but look at how disturbing the mere act of his job, which probably wouldn't seem all that horrible to an Eorzean. The whole having to condemn certain failed creations. Unpleasant business, yes, but
I mean, like, think about it. If you're a farmer, you're not that far off. Like, if you're slaughtering pigs, if
a farmer or a vet, experiences much the same thing, but they are such a product of this near, because it's not a full, but this near utopian world that they live in.
It is a paradise, even maybe if not a utopia.
Yeah, it's definitely a paradise. And obviously, I should clarify, it's not a utopia in the sense that it's absolutely perfect. It is based on the book Utopia.
Yeah, yes. Every time I think of using the word anywhere close to utopia to the unsundered world, my brain flashes to pandemonium.
Yes.
I'm just like...
That's a good point. I mean, pandemonium is an odd example, right? We have to sort of ask why they made it look like it did as well, but a bit beyond sort of raid design. But I think we'll learn a lot more about pandemonium. I think there are secrets to be uncovered there.
No question. I mean, think about how much I was just talking about this with people in the Discord this morning, but think about how much there is to learn from 2 more raid tiers, right? When you look at Alexander, you look at Omega, you look at Eden, and you just think about what you learned from the first tier compared to the next 2.
Right. I mean, hugely. Especially in Eden. We knew so little when we got to Eden, the first tier of Eden.
We didn't even really know who Gaia was or anything about her.
No, she was just a spooky goth GF.
Is that okay? Well, to be fair, I don't know if that's changed so much from that description.
Well, now she's a wholesome spooky goth GF.
Oh, my apologies. You are correct. Things are plow ahead on Mare Lamentorum so fast onto getting through the first half and heading straight into the fight with Zodiac that it is really impressive. I am stunned reviewing all the cutscenes. Like, oh right, this goes by in a second. Like there
Oh,
are
yeah.
very few cutscenes. It's just boom, 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 and yet, which is good because the motive energy is there, right? Like you're coming out of the Tower of Babel, like everything in Garlemald, like the things are coming to a climax.
The climax almost.
Yeah, right. And yet there is this moment for melancholy. There's this moment for tragedy because, I mean, because the crux of what comes next, right? The finale that you weren't expecting lingers upon the tragedy of the unsundered world, not just the things around Zodiark, but what is to come. And also because if you've been through Shadowbringers at this point, this tragedy, through what you experience in Amarot with Emmett Selk, what you experience with Elidibus, it matters. And so if you didn't take a moment to express that melancholy, as much as Zodiark is about to be a surprise and a twist, and it's not going to go the way we expect, the emotions still had to be right.
Yes. Yeah, it's something that this game does very well. It's something that Endwalker and Shadowbringer, I think, especially do very well, which is, it's not just the adrenaline of the fight. You know, they set up an emotional sort of baseline for the fight to stand upon. First, you know, they set up stakes, they set up the atmosphere, they set up the background and the understanding for it.
You know what it is? It's tragedy with catharsis.
Is it truth with consolation as well?
Yeah, but isn't it? But isn't that like what Vana grants us, right? Is she gives us eventually the truth and the consolation that there was intent and kindness behind it. You know, isn't that what Answers is ultimately?
Yeah, it's true. The consolation is that we get to hang out with Emma and Hydaelyn, of course. But...
That's one way of framing it. Yeah. Oh, I almost forgot to mention everyone's favorite blonde gold pup, Argos.
So I had a visceral reaction to Argos. My first reaction was laughing because I was like, "That looks hilarious." Then my second reaction was, "Oh my god, is that Minfilia?" And then my third reaction was, "Oh god, it's creepy."
Yeah, its eyes are so blue and staring and piercing, and it's such a. I don't know that it actually is, and I forget the kind of dog it is, but it is just so like pure breed. And my immediate view is like, why is there this uppity dog, like high class, highbrow dog in front of me? What?
Is it supposed to be an Afghan hound?
I think so. I'm terrible with dog breeds, but it is. I end up loving them. Like, don't get me wrong, and I also love how they are set up for the time loop to come. But it was not the type of imagery I was expecting.
No, it was weird. It's just this strange. Have you seen all the memes that are like, Vana only chose Minfilia as her vessel because she looked like her dog?
No. Oh, that's. You know, it just made me think of something. You know, whenever Hydaelyn possesses someone, Kryl or Minfilia, their eyes go blue. And I get that that's like the color of Aether and it fits. And, you know, the Mother Crystal and yada yada. But it's not like her eyes, when we meet her in Hydaelyn form, glow blue in that way. Or are in any way like whenever we see her in any form, like she has blue eyes. Like she has startling blue eyes as Vana, right? But it's not that like pupilless imagery.
No. Yeah. I think that it's almost although it is Aether and it is all these other things, I think it's also just a motif of Hydaelyn in general.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a good tell. It's like it works. So like I'm not gonna complain.
Yeah, no, definitely. But yeah, I think I grew to like Argus. I did. I think they look a little creepy. But
yeah,
sometimes that happens with video game dogs. I mean, anyone who's read JoJo's Bizarre Adventure will know that dogs in media can sometimes look a little odd.
It happens when you give them human eyes. But I will say also, once riding on them, it's not so much that I warmed up because of that, but it brings to mind something that's almost like Norse, like the cats of Freya, right? Or like there's something about it that is as maybe unexpected, or I don't want to say discordant because I don't think that's fair or necessarily true, but like at initial impression was a little discordant for me. After a while, it just clicked into place and it was fine.
Yeah, it soothes out. It does. Yes, it does. Especially, I think when I got to ride Argos, I was like, this is cool. I'm happy now.
Yeah. I guess I will say the other third thing that comes later is I believe that's Vanah's dog. You know?
Yeah.
I believe Vanah, that is the sort of animal that they would connect with.
You know that meme that's the vine that's like the guy walks in his house and the dog starts barking. He's like, "What the fuck is that?" And the owner's like, "It don't bite." That's Emmett walking into Vanah's house and seeing Argos.
See, now I'm just imagining that, but instead of Argos, it's Vanah doing it with us.
Yeah. Yeah, that's possible.
Oh, Hythlodaeus has a line that's really interesting to me. So he has the line, "The color of your soul is not the friend I knew, but you are nevertheless the same." You know, which further communicates the idea that me and you have, and plenty of other people have had, and it's been very implicit all throughout, that souls are dispositional, right? Like it is pretty normal to expect that a soul will grant a very similar disposition, even if not a guaranteed similar exact same self.
Yeah, you're not the same person, but it's almost like in nature versus nurture. You know, you always hear people in public space, in like pop culture, say, "Oh, I think it's one or the other." The actual thing is that it's both, and you know, I think this is part of the nature. You know, although the soul is important, although it does have an effect on who you are, I think also, you know, it is a connection of that and of the circumstances of your life and your experiences that forge you into who you actually are.
Absolutely, yeah. And I have some stories I'll be interested to see if ever play out with the further reflections on characters that we know who might have sundered souls, and whether or not we get to experience maybe radically different versions of them, let's just say.
Yeah, I mean, although there are definitely similarities, I don't think I mean, Hermes and Ammon are so radically different people.
Yeah, and we'll get to talk a little bit more about that here, right? Because with what's coming up, but we've talked about that in the past. But I can also see how I could see that Ammon was born dispositionally like Hermes, but if you're born amongst Allag during its time of atrophy and as it's sadistic, you know, what does that do to someone?
Yeah, and then your great hero that you resurrect, because, you know, we know that Hermes is idealistic almost to a fault and likes to create things and then get influenced by those things he creates. You know, what's that meme about? Oh, sweet, man-made horrors beyond my comprehension. But I think, you know, he makes Meteion and is influenced by Meteion, and he basically makes Xande again and is influenced by the now insane Xande.
It's literally one of his last words, and the Aetioscope later on, but for this, effectively, some of his last words is calling to Xande and his dream of oblivion and nihilism, like, and you know, like, I have fulfilled your wish. So, like, the fact that he would choose to do that in his last moments, like, this isn't just Ammon. This is Ammon who has the knowledge of Fandaniel, knows of the greater world, and yet still felt a connection and a belief in Xande all these, you know, millennia later.
Yeah, so I think his relationship with Xande, as we see it, is really interesting to me. I'm not even entirely sure if he's loyal to Xande the person as much as he is Xande the ideal.
I totally agree. And you, even when you use the Echo Vision in Zot, and you see that speech from Xande to him, it's almost like the idea of that speech, that oblivion, that nihilism, is what lingers within him more than any physical entity. And you even see that right in the fact that it's still not entirely clear, probably almost like based on the wording, language, and everything we get, 99.9% sure that the Ammon you fight in the Crystal Tower is a clone, just because that seems what they're saying. But, you know, fuck it. Setting that aside, it's not like Fandaniel ran off to go be by Xande's side when the Crystal Tower was reawoken during a War, right?
Yeah, no, there's I think it's a clone. I do think it's a clone. I don't know if there's any one person that Ammon Fandaniel would necessarily, you know, owe loyalty to per se, which is why I say the ideal of Xande, you know, this militant nihilism type thing.
I think you're totally right. I think you're right on the money with that. And then you look at Ammon's performance as Fandaniel, right? And his conviction to the ideal up until the end. And even it's interesting because he is so dedicated, and yet I actually wouldn't use the term conviction, right? Even onto the very end, some of his final words are, and maybe you'll prove me wrong, but fuck it. You know, it's like he has the dedication to this idea because he really doesn't think that there's value. And yet there's some amount of him that and onto when are his final words in Aetioscope that is just like, maybe, I don't know. He cares enough to want to burn it all down, and yet he's not convinced that that's right. He's just not convinced anything else is also right or good.
I think he's nihilist enough that it doesn't matter if you prove him wrong. Like,
yeah.
To him, I think he is that far gone that would not negate his nihilism. It would entrench it further. And I also think there's something, because when we meet him in the Aetioscope, right, he would have a more full gestalt of who Hermes actually was within it, wouldn't he? You know, like,
yeah, and he even has lines that allude to that.
Yes, he does. Which I think would change who he was. You know, Hermes and Ammon are different people, that's for sure. But a little bit less so when we meet them in the Aetioscope. Or maybe they're a whole new third person.
Yeah, he does. I mean, part of it is because he's so defeated, and at this point he has nothing else he can do. But I don't know which option you chose, but every time I play that scene, the only option I can choose is still to offer out a hand in friendship. And he's like, even now, even after all this, and some part of him I think clearly breaks a little in the idea that there is still a conviction for kindness out there, and it's not just about in the face of what he's done, it's more about in the face of such extreme nihilism, and in the face of nothing matters, and you are still bothering to try and reach a hand out in friendship or in hope.
Yeah, I always choose the empathetic choice on Niniri because I just feel like that's the warrior of light that the game most suits.
Mm-hmm.
Which is not to say that she's a pushover or anything in how I play her in the game. You know, I don't role play her as a, you know, in proper role play, but obviously I think most of us have a sort of an image of how our character reacts in the game.
Absolutely.
And certainly Niniri and myself and then playing the game try to be empathetic. So yes, I do offer out the hand to Fandaniel.
Well, let's teleport back quite a little ways and back to when we're talking to Hythlodaeus. And we also get confirmation from Hythlodaeus. I mean, this is also confirmed elsewhere, but further confirmation, Emet-Selch wanted us to have the Stone of Azem.
Yes.
Also that Hythlodaeus laughs that Emet-Selch was a slave to sentiment even after an eternity.
Yeah, so I definitely had that in mind already. I had already sort of assumed that Emmett wanted us to have the stone based on what we've seen, but it's nice to have the confirmation, especially from someone like Hitler who would know better than anyone else.
And was more likely to tell us the truth than even Emet-Selch himself.
Yes. So while we're talking with Hythlodaeus, right, I've got some notes here, yeah. So he talks about not recognizing Xenos' soul, which is very interesting to me, because I had always sort of assumed from the power of Xenos, from the fact that although his powers are artificial in the sense of his
resonant
powers, resonant, that's right. His resonant is artificial. I'd always assumed that just by the merit of how powerful he is, and how he acts and his dreams, of course, that he had to be unsundered. Well, not unsundered, but from the unsundered world. And it's possible, it's possible that Hythlo didn't meet him. I'm sure Hythlodaeus didn't meet everyone. It's interesting.
Yeah, I that is a point that I've really wanted to talk about. I talked about a little bit, I think, with some of the people in the Discord, but there's a lot of evidence in both directions, because the resonant, the fact that we need a resonant and not the echo, right? It could be representational, would imply that he does not have the echo, is not a sundered soul. However, it could be that it was a ancient that was sundered, but did not necessarily witness the final days, and maybe that's why they would not have the echo, or were not called to it. we also know from a Yoshi P interview the reason that he claimed at the time, and Yoshi P interviews should not always be taken as like immediate A-class canon. They're usually take as good guides until the MSQ contradicts. That the reason he thinks that Xenos has the dreams is because Solus is his grandfather, which, and something, I don't know, something Aether memory, yada yada yada, I don't know, you've played Assassin's Creed, genetic memory. But
yes,
so the memories imply, okay, would be a sundered soul, okay, but the explanation from Yoshi P applies, okay, maybe that's not the case. His extraordinary power makes you kind of think that's the case, but again, why would he need the resonance then? So it's this like, Hythlodaeus may have just not seen every single ancient that ever existed. That's quite possible. But also this kind of implies that maybe he never witnessed him because he's not an ancient. It's like, it's split right down the middle, and there's like hard evidence in both directions.
Yeah, I agree. It's something that I could go either way on. It's possible that Xenos is a non-Amratine unsundered, sundered, but from the unsundered world. You know, it's there was a world out there with numerous peoples. Maybe he's one of those. Who knows?
Oh, and one of our listeners also posited the idea that maybe the Echo cannot necessarily manifest in Garleans because of their inability to manipulate Aether or something like that. So that's also another theory, because you have the thing is that we know that Xenos has the ability to manipulate Aether after the resonance, but also thanks to the short stories, we know that he's able to manipulate Aether to a limited amount under extreme circumstances. So I don't know that works. Wow, this is a cycle that goes on forever.
It is, yeah. We don't have the information that we need to firmly answer, but it's an interesting question.
Yeah, I will say the one thing that I would make me wish that Xenos was a sundered being is that I would love to see a version of Xenos on another reflection given a completely different context. Like, what is a Xenos raised in a good context?
I think that's interesting to see, because it depends on how much you want to see, nature versus nurture in terms of psychopathy.
Right.
And I don't think, that we need to expect the most sound psychological scientific backing in that context in this game. But, Xenos is, of course, we would say nowadays, antisocial personality disorder, but, it is psychopathic. He has a great deficit of empathy and of a poverty of emotion. And I think it would be really interesting to see how that would affect it. Is that a product of his horrible upbringing? Because a lot of people forget, of course, that Xenos was horribly abused as a child and grew up in a horrendous environment just in general. So I would be very interested to see what he'd be like otherwise. Maybe like a mercenary adventurer type vibe.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I was thinking. Imagine what happens if you have a warrior of light person who's intellectually, idealistically like, yes, I want to do good. Also, what the hell is good? I don't feel. Almost like a warrior of light who's has a blood frenzy, but is also a little bit on the spectrum, but is trying. Like something. I feel like there's a lot of ways that the same way that there are people in the real world who have antisocial personality disorders that can find ways to make that function in the business world or like into a constructive end.
Oh yeah, I mean, nobody's born without the potential to be, to live a full and healthy life, of course. But yeah, I would be really interested to see. I also think that the game does try at certain points to make us see, and successfully as well, to make us see that we are a few steps divorced from being Xenos.
Yeah, and that comes to such a, in my mind, personally, beautiful culmination by the end of Endwalker.
I love that scene.
It's so good. It is one of the few times that something has gone full anime that I've been like, yep, this is perfect. 10 out of 10.
Yeah, a lot of people call this game an anime game. It's not remotely, but
it's such a silly notion.
I mean, ignore the whole string of raids that are Gundam, but just ignore those ones. It's okay.
I will say the weapons line was the one time that I'm like, okay, guys, we're going like there are moments in Final Fantasy XIV that go a little anime. I will shout that from the rooftops, but calling it an anime game is pretty hysterical.
Yeah, we
are really bad at protecting the brands.
We're not good. I choose that. I choose to read that as an appeal to players being horrible at escort quests.
that's a read. But we get to them late every fucking time, and it's like you gotta make sure get that last brand. If they get it, we're done for it, and they just destroy it, and you just kind of like saunter in, like, oh well, fuck.
We do our best.
We literally have Argos fly us to the last one, and we still don't make it in time.
Yeah.
The thing almost outran that. Argos almost outran Meteon.
Yeah, who has like hyper light travel. Yeah, we look. They've had a long time to plan this whole thing. You know, they've probably mapped out their routes. They've figured out sort of like wall hacks and various sort of speedrun glitches to get to the brands quicker. You know, it's I'll take it on the chin. It's fine.
Yeah, no. I mean, like, I didn't have too much of a problem. I'm just like, okay, well, okay.
They can also both teleport.
Yes. No, I mean, like, they motherfuckers can move fast. Xenos is powerful enough to break the brand. I mean, I'm assuming that even the final one was weakened already, but like Xenos is powerful enough to just be like, nope, you're gone.
Yeah, I assumed that it weakened them, but you know, Xenos is of course absurdly powerful.
So I love this scene here for a couple of reasons, but one of the things I want to point out that's was me being silly in the past, but also simultaneously I feel vindicated out, is that there is a shot where Fandaniel is just standing with his legs spread and his coat perfectly blocks out his legs, so it looks like he's just floating. And when we saw the trailer for 6.0, the like gameplay trailer, that shot was in it, and I'm like, wait, why is Fandaniel's legs missing? Is he like in a spirit form or something? Like, which is a dumb thing to think, but also I feel vindicated because you literally can't even see his freaking legs now, like in the shot, like when you can pause it and do whatever you want.
I've got to admit, look, Elio, I was looking at your notes earlier, and I was staring at legs spread and missing written on the page. I was like, what? What is he about to say?
I'm glad I can offer these mysteries for you, even on to knowing the plot.
Well, I was excited, and I'm pleased. I'm pleased that it was about the trailer. Yeah, I mean, I think I remember us discussing that briefly at the time, but who knows what can go on with Asians.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it to you, and you're ever so often as you are kindly like, yeah, that's a thought.
Hey, we can't be discouraging theorizing.
No, not at all. But the reason I really love this scene is because of conversations that I had before 6.0 came out, and that is around Fandaniel and whether or not he meant what he said when he said, I want to die and I want to take you all with me, and I want like and the viciousness, and like, is there another layer to this? Is this actually just a strategy behind something else? Is this? And I was convinced, like, no, that comes from a look at his face, look at his performance, look at those words. That's a sincere belief. And to have him turn to you and be like, when I told you I wanted to die and take you all with me, I meant it. And yeets himself into the void. It was just like, I was simultaneously like, I fucking felt a kind of catharsis, and then I also went, wait, did he just fucking do what?
Yes.
And everybody else in that scene is also like, did he just do that?
Even Xenos.
Yeah.
It was I love it because so many games don't have the cojones, we'll say, to deliver on that kind of thing, to see out their antagonist, the major antagonist, who does have such a profound nihilism that there is no moment when it breaks or cracks, really. Even when he's saying, prove me wrong if you want, it's not him, you know, surrendering. Even if we'd killed him there, I think he would have won in his mind, you know, before he managed to get to Zodiac. I think he was genuinely just seeing how far he could go with this.
Yeah, and I think that his plan was such, right? And he gets at this later, but if we kill him, Xenos is still going to get to Zodiarch. And then we have to kill Xenos in Zodiarch, in which case Final Days gets activated. Like, or he kills us and uses Zodiarch's power to turn off the Ethereal Shroud. Or he dies and Xenos takes over Zodiarch and Xenos kills us, in which case Xenos is going to go mad and destroy everything anyway. Like, there's no way that his plan doesn't have him win.
He probably goes down thinking, well, there's no way that I lose. There's a few routes through here, but not one of them has me do anything but win in the long term. So I mean, I'm good for him, I guess.
Yeah, well, and I just love how he's theatric onto the end. Like, I mean, obviously we still have a little bit to go with him, but like even that in that moment was like, just a moment, just can I have a moment of your time? I promise I'll be quick. Like,
yeah, I like that he commits to the bit, and I when he jumps into the void, I'm like, what the? I knew that Hydaelyn was going to do something fucky with I knew that he wasn't being genuine, but
yeah. Well, and also the mood, like when the music stops in that scene and like the mood shifts, you're like, what is he up to? What's good? The fuck is going on here?
yes.
So yeah, then we descend into the dark below, and we get the arrival of the masks that represent all the souls of the Ascians that lie within Zodiark itself.
Yeah, it really hammers home. I think the scene where they're all waiting to go into back in Shadowbringers, where they're all waiting
Hades.
to go into the bureau where they're
Oh, yeah.
volunteering themselves. I think that's a really beautiful scene. I think that sort of comes full circle here when we see their masks.
Yeah, and like we were pointing out earlier, a lot of the lines in there are direct sort of echoes and references to the language of that and the language of the Final Days itself. And so it's this like, and it's this tragedy you've seen before because it echoes what happened with Hades during the fight, the final trial of Shadowbringers, and the way in which Hades carried the souls of the dead in a way from his role, but also the hopes and dreams and aspiration he carried their mantle upon him and everywhere he went in his duty. And so it's this familiar thing, but then it's in itself tragic, and then it's twisted even further when even the souls of the dead who have sacrificed themselves, given all of themselves just to try and from their standpoint return paradise, make the world better, save those they love, and they are used as a living weapon by this sadistic maniac.
Yes, so I love that because of how perverse it is almost, and also how much it makes sense, right? It's
right.
not that Hydaelyn overpowering the spirits come out of nowhere, because we know that Zodiark was made to have a living, in finger brackets, being at its helm. It was made to have Elidibus,
a will and a heart. Yeah,
right. So Hydaelyn being able to assume the control makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it fully formed and a physical being. Yeah, absolutely. And that, because I remember seeing them thinking, like, why is he so specifically able to overpower them? And when I remembered that right, he would have been missing his heart because of Elidibus and his occupying that role. That makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And then the full reveal of our boy, the big boy, I believe we are calling him. Matt. We still haven't seen his full form yet, but it's also, I love that because he's not fully formed, he's missing chunks and pieces and parts of him. And so he's clearly this malformed entity, but is still also clearly incredibly powerful.
Yeah, so he's missing like multiple arms and like
his middle
part of his like core is gone, and he's missing a number of tentacles. I hate when that happens. Yeah. His design's awesome though, and it's really cool. It almost looks like he's put seals over the places where he's missing body parts to stop his like aether from bleeding out or something. It looks awesome.
Yeah, I love that fact that it's not just missing, it is that there's like those seals that float within. So when I first got there, I remember my very first thought was, upon like the trials beginning, not like getting the trial, I was like, wait, this is trial 1? What are the next two? Like, where is this story going from here?
Yes, I got to that point and went into the trial, and I was thinking, there's no way. There's going to be a subversion. This is not how this works. This cannot be it. And I don't mean to say that I disliked it.
Oh God,
Of course, when it came out to be true, I liked it. But I was so surprised. I really thought really thought Zodiark was going to be the final boss of the base expansion.
Yeah, I was wholly sure, like, because that was the safe bet. It's what made sense, right? Because it was what this saga had in simple, like the simple version, right, is this is what the saga had been leading to, and it is instead so much more, and it's a twist, right? It is a twist, but it's a great twist that makes sense and uses it to go somewhere, and also ultimately where we're led is, I feel, a more cathartic finale than a simple showdown with Zodiark would have been.
Yes, yeah. Zodiark himself, as Zodiark isn't a character, right? Not really, not in the way that Hydaelyn is.
No, because without Elidibus, I mean, with Elidibus, it's basically Elidibus, and without Elidibus, it's literally the only way it's defined is basically a creature of pure instinct. It's basically just a shell.
It's an animal, really.
It's sin.
Yeah, it is sin. That's a good sin from FF10. Yes, that is a good comparison, actually. And I really enjoyed the fight. I thought the fight was really good. And although I was like, the only place that we can go now is to discover the thing beyond the final days, the thing that caused it. I was really happy with how that went down. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of the Meteon story. So
Yes.
I thought they really delivered. This game keeps doing such ambitious things that it makes me worried, and then it keeps delivering on them.
And then that makes me worried because I'm like, okay, but like you've earned my respect, so now I respect you, but I'm still worried, like, And the thing is, I'm not too stressed ultimately, because if they drop the ball, it'll be fine. It'll be fine, and they will pick it back up, and they will dust themselves off, and they will learn from it, and they will continue to strive to do better and improve.
Yes.
But yeah, I love the Zodiark. I love all three of the trials a lot. The thing is, I really love the Zodiark fight as a characterization tool, because so much of the skills and attacks and things are tied to, it's not just Zodiark attacks, it is Daniel given a lot of power attacks, like attacks that are tied to things from the Crystal Tower. He keeps referencing Syracuse. Also, thank God for him saying it out loud, so now I know it's Syracuse instead of Syracis, or it just, I know for sure how it is pronounced officially.
I was just pronouncing it as circus at this point to lean into Circus Tower, but yeah, Circus. Yeah. I mean, it's not too far off, but yes,
it's close enough.
I'm always glad to have the confirmation on the pronunciation. Yeah, so then he takes his mask off, of course, and he looks a little bit more chaosy. You see, I liked his mask. I thought it was a cool mask.
Yeah, I think it was a really good visual motif. Like, it also harkened onto something that made him look less human, and ergo, I think, more like the totemic representations that you might have expected from everything that we had kind of gleaned prior.
Yes. Like you said, it's interesting to see how essentially it's not even like Shiva and Eorzean. It is more like he's just picking up a weapon.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, a hugely messed up weapon, and like vastly powerful, of course, but still.
What if you gave Amon the power of an ancient? I mean, like, obviously this is more than the power of an ancient, but you basically just said, hey, Amon, yeah, you can full use creation magic, let's go for it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm sure Amon would have loved that very much.
Oh, jeez. Yeah, don't get me started.
We'd have seen some messed up stuff there.
I remembered the other thing about during the fight, and also upon beating Zodiark, that all I could think about was a Zodiark ultimate, or like the Endwalker ultimates are going to be a wild ride. Especially, this is coming out, will be being recorded as Dragonsong Ultimate is being discovered and figured out. And the things that they have done with that alone tell me that the next few ultimates are just going to be wild.
There's been cool stuff in all the ultimates, but I'm not going to spoil it in here because it's very recent content, of course. I mean, yes. I'm sure this video will go out in a while anyway, but
they go in some places.
They're really they are. It's an alternate. I don't think this is too big of a spoiler. It's alternate timeline stuff, and obviously not maybe not alternate timeline, but an alternate telling of a story. Like he's writing an AU.
Yeah, that's exactly how I described it. It's like, the thing is that the prior battles were technically the same, but they're more like embellished versions of the tale. Like, obviously some of them are more than that. They're key moments that are more than that, but they are really like a little bit more like hyper embellished versions of the tale, like by the bard going wild. But this one is just like, okay, but I know the actual history. I read the book. that Francival wrote. I am instead going to tell an AU fictional history. Like, just straight up things happen completely different.
Right? Yeah, and although it's a messed up history, maybe it's one that I would like to have lived in, because I'm very attached to a certain character.
The thing I love too about it is that not only is it like, oh, what if this X character lived or Y character died? There's a lot of things in it that are tied to ideas in lore that were set up in a bunch of different places, including the Binding Coils of Bahamut, where they were very explicitly stated.
Yes.
And so it's using a lot of things that have come prior that were left behind as little nuggets of ideas.
Yes, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, so an Zodiark Ultimate would be crazy, and I assume you're, fully formed Zodiark, right? Like, there's no question that we'd fight Zodiark at it. What if he was all the shards had somehow been rejoined and he was max power?
Yeah, I think it revolves around Zodiark and Hydaelyn.
Yeah, it'll be a doozy, that's for sure.
Yes, it will.
As we touched on earlier, it's a brilliant plan because we defeat him, and it is revealed to us that this has all been to Amon's machinations, because our defeating of Zodiark has weakened it enough to allow him to kill himself effectively. And upon doing so, well, we'll find out more on this later, but we have initiated the final days by the death of Zodiark.
Yeah, we have ended the world, or set it in motion, certainly. And he is then free to go on to his afterlife. Well, he's then go on to rejoin the souls of the star and let us just die in horror, and
he shall return to the ethereal sea, where we'll never hear from him again.
Yeah, I saw a hilarious meme about that encounter. I'll send it to you after we've recorded.
Please do. Yeah. I hold umbrage with this, but I also love that he says it. He says, "Let your murder mark the beginning of the end." It's like, murder? You motherfucker! This is at worst self-defense.
Yes, yeah, but that's very Fandaniel, isn't it? It's very Amon.
Yeah.
He loves to twist the knife.
I really do love Amon's final words as he's in his Pokemon bubble, drifting into the ethereal sea, where he's just like, he's not just like get fucked, but he is also like, yep, this was all pointless. I have lived all these lives. I know there is no value. I see none. I am at last doing the one thing to prove it. There is nothing. Sweet oblivion, not just for me, but for all existence. Get fucked.
Yes. Yeah. It's nothing matters, and even if stuff matters, it doesn't matter. So fuck you.
Yeah. It's also just I know we talked about this multiple episodes, but it's so wild to me to be like, nothing matters, but I care enough to make sure that you all know it, and you're all coming with me.
Yeah, definitely. What's that one tweet from Drill? I will face God and walk backwards into hell.
Yeah, I mean, but isn't it so important though that he has a flair for the dramatic? Because I think there's a penchant for that does have to tie in with the desire to take everyone with you, with the desire to go down in a blaze of glory. Because I think if he doesn't have a sense of the dramatic, I don't think you have that same kind of disposition towards wanting to do that.
Yeah, no, I agree. The whole core of so many nihilist characters in fiction is that they speak like this and they all wear grey and all of that. But I really like the twist on it that they give with, and there's little elements of that maybe with Xenos, who has the monotone voice, who is bored all the time, which is not the kind of nihilism, I know we've discussed this before, not the kind of nihilism that we have with Fandaniel. Fandaniel has his own brand, and it's showy, and it's not that Fandaniel doesn't feel things, like he said, as he dies, he says, he talks about how he's gleeful to have unloaded this sort of future upon you.
Yeah, the line, what is the, always awake, but not this time. Nothing left unsaid, nothing left undone. Inherit my hell, I intone with glee. What a fucking line.
Yeah. And it's such a direct refutation of Vanar. It's such a refutation of our favorite line of the "We shall walk" line. It's your walk means nothing to anyone you're all just pretending, and I'm going to prove it.
And in the end, it's the whole thing too with, as much as we can defeat Medion, right? The whole point is that you don't defeat Amon in terms of convincing him he's wrong with words, and maybe somehow you could with actions, but you convince him he's wrong just by the actions. It's the doing. You have to do the doing of the thing because it's right, not because it's going to work, not because it's going to pay off, because it may very well not. When we go to Ultima Thule in the end, we are not going because we are going convinced that we can do this, but it's also not guaranteed we can.
Yeah, Amon is wrong. I think the game goes plenty far enough to say that, and I think that we can see as people ourselves that Amon was very much wrong. But also, there is no way to defeat Amon, really.
No.
Even obviously we've talked about how there's no, he's stacked the deck. He will win no matter what we do. But even when we do the massively unexpected and destroy Meteon, destroy is not the right word. When we deal with the Meteon issue, he's already freed himself from the long walk, and he's already, we don't disprove him. His stance wasn't predicated on the world is going to end. His stance was predicated on the world inherently does not matter. None of this matters.
And in a sense, we didn't even we did not create something that says, yes, no, there is inherent meaning. We just came up with there isn't meaning, but it's valuable to create some anyways.
Yes. Yeah. And then he fades. He fades off into the Eorzean Zodiac is gone.
Yeah, which is a whole new world. And upon returning to the surface, we witness a whole new world bathed in blood and desecration, and doom as a terrible female voice we've never heard before cries out, yes, at last.
We go on to meet an amazing antagonist who take the first steps, and so eldritch and foreboding, this voice echoing out from the dark of space, claiming victory, and so assured that there is no belief in Meteon that we could fight back, that we have any recourse against her at all. It is, I have won. The moment that Zodiac dies, I have won.
And it's all the more terrifying when you think about the fact that not only does that happen now, not only does the final days begin, we do not bear witness onto this foe for many hours of the game left yet. There is much and more to do until we bear witness to this foe at all, and many more hours until we actually truly begin to understand what it is and from whence it comes. Because as much as we meet Medion upon entering Elpis, you have to go through almost the entirety of Elpis before you actually truly get any insight into the Endsinger.
And think about, for the other stars, the stars that already fell to Meteon, how unknowable she must have been. They don't have the framework. They don't get to go to Elpis. They don't even get to understand her. They don't meet her. She is a Lovecraftian god unto them.
She is, literally. I mean, that's the only thing that makes her non-Lovecraftian is the fact that she becomes a knowable thing that we can fight back against and defeat. If the entirety of Endwalker continued along the framework from once the final days were happening when we're dealing with Thavnair and the like, as we will talk about later, that would just be eldritch, just straight up.
If we'd gotten on the moon and fled instead of going to Elpis, instead of sort of pursuing all of that, if we just accepted the proposal, then she would have been just this unknowable creature in the depths of space that's already eaten most of existence.
Ugh.
It's creepy.
Truly terrifying, truly a wonderful setup for what's to come. It's like, yes, you have defeated what you thought was the big bad. Oh, it's going to get so much worse. Which I would also like to point out is yet another example of Final Fantasy XIV doing the thing of, yes, you defeated the big bad, but here's the actual big bad, which is usually a bad cliche. Instead, their execution of it is good, and the context is right, so it's not bad. It's instead very good.
Yeah, it sounds silly to say because it's a big part of the expansion, so of course it would, but it cannot be overstated how much this expansion does not work without Elpis.
Yeah.
Which is to say, all of it does not work without Elpis.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to think about... I mean, I guess you could argue that the only map that works, maybe perhaps makes it work even less, is if you don't have Ultima Thule. But that's like, yes, if you cut out the last 40 minutes of a movie, the movie's not very good.
Yeah, but I've got a lot to say about Elpis and how I think it was a huge risk.
Oh my god, yeah.
Especially,
it's almost hard to remember now. Like I
Yeah.
know it, but it's so pervasive in terms of my thought of the game and the world and its success that was such a risk.
Yeah, hugely risk. And I also think bringing Emmett back was a risk. I've said this before. I was reading this awesome sort of like essay on Reddit of all sites about how, you know, Emmett does not work without Hythlodaeus, for example. I think Elpis does not work without Hythlodaeus. I think maybe the expansion as a whole falls a lot flatter without Hythlodaeus.
100%.
Now, maybe that's just because I'm a huge fan of Hythlodaeus.
But like part of the reason we're huge fans of Hythlodaeus is because despite an incredibly small amount of screen time in Shadowbringers, we were won over, and then despite a relatively small amount of time in Endwalker, we're fucking falling head over heels for him. So like it's not. Yes, I think. Yes, do I love Hythlodaeus a lot? Sure, but I think the part of the point actually of why he is so vital is because you can love him that much, because you care about Hades, you care about him, and you have a connection to him, but that's different, and also he's in a different place. And yes, you care about Vana, but Vana's always a certain amount of removed from you because of the relationship that you ultimately will have. And Hythlodaeus is, he's never like, oh, here's your number one confidant, but he's always able to be a little bit on the side compared to some of the other characters.
Yeah, I think the core of it is that Vana, Hermes, and Emmett, especially Emmett, don't work in Elpis without Hythlodaeus as a narrative. They would not nearly be as compelling, and I don't think that Elpis works without them, and thus I don't think the expansion by extrapolation really works without him in there. I think he softens so much. I think he humanizes so much of the story.
And this is why you need to put purple hair by boys in all your games.
Yes, exactly.
That's our thesis statement. Goodbye. Endtalkers is finished. Finale. But yeah, I guess maybe there's a couple final points, but one of the things I would want to point out is, I don't want to say I love, but I do find it pretty funny how hard Xenos gets blue-balled here.
Yes, it's I just have to think about what it was like for Xenos to go through this. I mean, he has to have felt something in response to this. He must have been like, I expected him to do something, fucky, but oh my god.
I do love that, like, he arrives back on, top side in full Reaper form, pulls out his scythe, ready to go, and just like, nah, your heart's not in it. We'll do this later.
Well, I like that he gets to that point in this expansion. He gets to the point where he's trying to force the fight. There's no denying that, but it's not him constantly demanding the fight, even when it's not going to work out the way that he wants. He's not pestering us constantly anymore. Really, he keeps on coming up to us, and he's like, "Yeah, you're not ready."
Yeah, I do love. I also do love that, and we'll get into it as it comes up more at different points. But he does kind of go on it's not soul searching really, but kind of a soul searching mission after this, where he's like, well, I know you're gonna have shit to deal with right now, so I need to go figure out something to do in the meantime. And you get to just see like little glimpses of him at different points, and in some places that are really vital and important. For instance, when he returns to Garlemald later on in that whole conversation. But even just him standing in the menagerie, there's a lot of interesting points.
Well, he opened up his scrapbook of you and him, and he was like, "I've just gone on a tour of our greatest moments."
Very much so.
This is the place where I possessed your body in a horribly disturbing display of your lack of agency. That was nice, wasn't it?
Why do I get the feeling he definitely took a photo of that?
I think he did. No, he had Fandaniel do it for him.
Yeah, you're probably right.
And Fandaniel photobombed it.
Well, since a lot of the stuff that comes next is going to fill its own episode, both, ethereal shrouds and other moon stuff and bunnies, but for now, I think probably maybe cut it off, but I'd love to touch on sort of the final things said by the Warrior of Light, or at least it's one of the options. But I love that as Xenos is like, you're gonna play my game. One of your options, just hope will prevail in the end.
Yes.
And that sort of staunch, it's yet one more perspective, but the Warrior of Light is kind of a simplistic character at times, and that's okay. But it's not this like huge diatribe. It's just hope will win. You are wrong.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the core thesis statement, I know that we've said this probably 100 times already, and y'all are probably getting tired of hearing it, but the value of experience and the sort of inherentness of hope in human, not quite the right word, but in human by our standards life is inherent.
And it's really the only weapon against despair in the end. Like, because there are going to be nights as black as pitch, and if you don't have something to cling to, it's hard to get through them.
Yeah, definitely.
And on that happy note, let's prepare to sign out, shall we, Niniri?
Yes, let's do it.
Well, I've been Elio Forcheron.
I've been Niniri.
And it has been a fabulous time having you all with us. If you'd like to support us, why not try checking out our wonderful Patreon and dropping us $1 if you think you'd like to help support us. You could also join our Discord if you'd like to talk with other lore people, join our lore book clubs, or check out any of our other content on the YouTubes, as well as our wonderful website where Niniri writes many of the beautiful and fantastic articles that can inform you on all manner of little tidbits of lore all throughout Etheris.
Oh, I hope you all enjoy it if you check it out, and I know that you'll enjoy the YouTube if you check it out, because Elio does excellent work on there.
With all that said, thanks very much, guys. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
This content was brought to you by the Eorzean Archives. If you enjoyed this video, help us please the 12 by leaving a like and subscribing for new content every Thursday. And comment down below with any topic you'd like to see our Archons cover in the future. For even more content, discussion, and exclusives, please check out our Discord and consider supporting us on Patreon.